We start today with Daniel from Princeton University for some work about cutoff phenomenon for the Swendsen-Wang dynamics.
Okay, thank you. Thank you all for coming early in the morning. So today I'm going to talk about a joint work with Alan, who's my advisor. And the outline will be the following. Pointer's not working. Okay, so since I only have 20 minutes, I'll first briefly review the models we're going to be interested in. And then I'll explain a very interesting phenomenon called cutoff for Markov chains. And then, I'll describe the main result and some ideas if time permits. So we've already seen Ising model many times during this workshop, especially Martin's talk yesterday. So one thing to remind here is that we are only be working on with d-dimensional lattice torus with side length n. Okay? And each vertex is assigned with either plus or minus spin as usual, and the configurations are distributed according to the Gibbs measure, like this. So this exponent represents the minus of the Hamiltonian, and to obtain this quantity, as you can see, we first multiply the endpoint spins of an edge and then sum this over all edges. Beta denotes the inverse temperature, and we will work on the ferromagnetic case of non-negative beta, and Z is the normalizing constant, aka partition function. Okay? So we already saw these pictures of phase transition yesterday too. So the first and the third one is generated under the plus boundary condition. So in the high temperature, the boundary effect is negligible in the limit, while in the low temperature, it has a long-range effect. And at the critical point, we see very interesting things such as SLE-type interfaces, which most of you would know much better than I do. So from now on, we're going to be interested in the Markov chains on the Ising model. So motivation for studying such object is not only it is used in practice to generate these kinds of pictures, but also they can somehow explain the time evolution of the Ising model. So one of the first such model is the Glauber dynamics. So let's see what this Markov chain does. Let's say our current spin configuration is sigma t, and then at first we pick a uniformly random vertex. So let's say this vertex x has been picked, and then we will update the spin at this vertex according to the conditional Ising distribution given the spin values at its neighbors. And for the rest of the vertices, we stay fixed. So for instance, if we were in this figure, then the probability of our next spin at x being plus is proportional to e to the 2 times beta, and the probability of our next spin being equal to minus is proportional to e to the minus 2 times beta, just because this has like 3 plus neighbors and 1 minus neighbor. And it's easy to see that this Markov chain is ergodic and reversible with respect to the Ising model, and has local update rules in the sense that at each time we see a vertex and its neighbors. And the central question has always been, how long should we run this Markov chain to obtain a close enough sample from the Ising model? And we will come back to this question later. So is this definition clear? Okay. Hopefully. The second Markov chain I want to describe is the Swendsen-Wang dynamics, which is based on the relation between the Ising model and the random cluster model. So we will always fix a parameter p to be 1 minus e to the minus 2 beta. So this will lie between 0 and 1. And in the first step, if our current spin is sigma, then we will generate an edge configuration, a subset of edges, by selecting each monochromatic edge with probability p independently. So by monochromatic, I mean that this edge is having same spins at its endpoints. Okay. So by this procedure, we get an edge configuration, and according to this omega, we will update the spins at each connected component of omega by a uniformly random spin. So the vertices in the same connected component will be updated into a same spin, which is uniform. So to see it in the pictures, we start from a spin configuration, and after first step, we obtain an edge configuration by selecting monochromatic edges with probability p independently. we forget the previous spin, and then update into a new spin by component-wise uniformly random assignment. Okay? So we get a new spin here. So actually, these two steps are the ways to move from the Ising model to the random cluster model and vice versa. So for instance, if sigma here was distributed according to the Ising model, then the resulting omega follows the random cluster model, and the same thing happens for the second step as well. So is the definition clear? So it is also easy to see that this Markov chain is ergodic and reversible with respect to the Ising model, and it's non-local because we update pretty much everything at each step, and this is the main reason why it is sort of difficult to study this model mathematically. So now I'll briefly review how we measure the convergence of Markov chains. So let's say we have a Markov chain, and then the distance we're going to use is the total variation distance, which is just the half of the L1 distance between two distributions. And we will always be interested in the distance between the stationary distribution and the distribution of our Markov chain at time t. Okay? And the mixing time is the minimal time when the total variation distance drops below epsilon for all possible starting configurations x0. Okay? So now we know how to measure the mixing time. Now let's see what the mixing time should be for the Glauber dynamics and the Swendsen-Wang dynamics. So this is the known or believed picture. So for the Glauber dynamics at high temperatures, it is known that it should have known to have logarithmic mixing time of constant times n log n, and it is also known to show cutoff, which I will describe in the next slide. And at the critical point, the mixing time is believed to be polynomial, and the high temperature is known to be exponential. And the Swendsen-Wang dynamics exhibits sort of a similar picture, except that when the mixing time is logarithmic, it should be log n rather than n log n. And it's also believed to be very efficient in the low temperature as well, where the Glauber dynamics is very inefficient. And there are also many previous results studying the mixing time of the Swendsen-Wang in various different settings. I just want to point out a few of them. So we basically know the polynomial mixing time bound for all beta and d in the case of the Ising model on the lattice. And then if it's two dimensions and if we were at high temperatures, then we know a slightly better thing of order n. Okay. So now let's talk about the cutoff phenomenon. So now let's say we are plotting our total variation distance with respect to time. Then we can expect several types of convergence behaviors. So for instance, our Markov chain might converge to equilibrium sort of slowly and steadily, like in the first picture. But in some other cases, we can expect a sharp transition, like in the second picture. So namely, our Markov chain doesn't mix at all until a certain time, and then suddenly it kind of mixes very quickly after some threshold, and the distance drops to 0 in a relatively very short period of time. So if our Markov chain exhibits the second type of behavior, we say it has cutoff. So this phenomenon is first discovered by Aldos Diaconis and Salov Coast in the 80s, where they studied like random walks and groups, especially the card shuffles. And to be a bit more rigorous, let's say we have a sequence of Markov chains where this index n usually denotes the size of your underlying system. So for instance, we can think about the Swendsen-Wang dynamics on side length n torus with different values of n. Okay? So we say that there's cutoff if this ratio converges to 1, and this says that the time you need to just slightly mix when your distance drops to just 1 minus epsilon is asymptotically the same as the time you are very well mixed. So when your distance drops to epsilon. Okay? So cutoff phenomenon is believed to be quite general among lots of Markov chains. But at the first glance, this sharp transition doesn't sound very natural. So one way to intuitively understand this is that so let's say we have Markov chain, and suppose that we have certain pivotal event that governs the mixing, in the sense that if you encounter that event, then you know that you're very well mixed, but before you reach to that event, you are not mixed at all. And then in lots of cases, it's kind of fair to expect that the time when you encounter that event sort of concentrates, and this eventually implies cutoff. Okay. So is the definition clear of the cutoff phenomenon? Okay. Hopefully yes. So there are a few results known on the cutoff for the Ising model. First such result was due to Levin, Luczak, and Perez, where they studied Glauber dynamics for the Ising model on the complete graph. So it's called the mean field Ising model, and they show that it has cutoff for all high temperatures. And later, Alan and Ira Lubetsky show that the Glauber dynamics for the Ising model on the lattice also has cutoff at all high temperatures. And today, our main result shows that the Swendsen-Wang dynamics at high enough temperature has cutoff. So our result can be stated as follows. So there exists some explicit thresholds so that if our beta is below that, then the Swendsen-Wang dynamics on the lattice has cutoff at this time. So as a consequence, we can see that the Swendsen-Wang dynamics should have log n mixing time as well. So this is sort of the first proof of a cutoff phenomenon for a non-local Markov chain. So all the previous results dealing with the local cases of Glauber dynamics type. And this proof works for the same in the Potts model as well, but for slightly worse regime of beta, as one can imagine. Okay. So for the rest of the talk, I will try to convince you why the Swendsen-Wang dynamics should exhibit cutoff at high temperatures. Okay. So let's just briefly recall the definition. We start from a spin configuration. We generate an edge configuration by selecting monochromatic edges with probability p, and then we assign new spins by component-wise uniformly random sense. Okay. So let's say our beta is small, then our edge selection probability p is also small, which means that in the first step of generating omega, we sort of have a subcritical percolation, so that the component sizes of omega should be something order log n at most. And this means that the information travels a constant times log n distance in a single step. This is because if we have two vertices in the different connected components, then in the next step they will be updated into independent spins, which means that the information from one does not have any effect on the other. Okay. So if we run our Markov chain until some time log squared n, which is strictly greater than what the mixing time should be, then the information cannot travel longer than, say, log 4th n. So I added one more log here just to take union bounds over all time and vertices. So until like sort of long enough time, our information can reveal only logarithmic distance of things, travel that small distance. So what we're going to do is that we will partition the domain into slightly larger cubes, say log 5th n. Then the information starting from one cube would not reach to the other unless these two are neighboring with each other. Okay. So if we can somehow eliminate the dependencies between the two neighboring cubes, then we will end up having some independent Swendsen-Wang dynamics going on the smaller subcubes. Okay? And then the original chain will reduce into a product chain. And since the product chains are one of the basic examples of cutoff, we can expect the Swendsen-Wang dynamics should also have cutoff as well. So the main point of the proof here is sort of making a rigorous mathematical argument on this red sentence, which I definitely have no time to explain anymore. But anyway, by this sort of argument, this is kind of an intuition of how the proof goes. Okay. So I'll finally mention one further problem one can work on. So the natural thing to ask is that does the same thing happens for general temperature regimes. Okay? So not much thing is known about like when for the general beta, when beta is not small enough, because like there are previous results that proves like polynomial mixing time bounds for the Swendsen-Wang for all beta, but they actually don't deal with the Swendsen-Wang dynamics itself. They rather study some other types of models, such as the FK Glauber dynamics, random cluster Glauber dynamics, and then use comparison techniques to derive results for the Swendsen-Wang. So basically, especially in the low temperature, we don't know anything to do on the Swendsen-Wang dynamics itself. And because of the prominent difference from the Glauber dynamics, so this exponentially slow behavior and logarithmic fast behavior of the Swendsen-Wang, I think it's a pretty difficult and interesting problem to study. And since I have a few more minutes left, I sort of prepared an appendix slide of whether cutoff should happen at low or critical temperatures. So I'll briefly do this. So in the low temperature, what we basically have is two ground states, and so it's for the Glauber dynamics, because Swendsen-Wang should have cutoff. So yeah, so in the low or critical temperature, the Glauber dynamics shouldn't have cutoff as a conclusion. And one way to understand this is what you basically have is the chain starting from one ground state should hit the other ground state. And one can show that this first hitting time sort of does not concentrate in the limit, which means that you wouldn't see cutoff. Okay. And for the critical temperature, there's kind of we don't know whether there's cutoff or not, but the belief is there should not be cutoff due to simulations. And it's also hard to find intuitive explanation on this intuition. But so for instance, what I explained previously for the high temperature does not generalize because the correlation decay is not good enough, so that we cannot split the domains what we did as before. And one thing at least we know is that there's no cutoff for the mean field case at criticality. Okay? Yeah. So I'll stop here and thank you for your attention.
Any questions?
Just roughly, what was the argument for separating log?
Oh yeah. So to just say a few words, let's say we have this is our graph at some time terminal time t, and then we kind of reveal it backwards, and at some time t minus s where s is strictly smaller than log n, we sort of see that the vertices that actually has an effect at this stage is sort of sparse enough so that they are separated more than like log fifth n. So we can only sort of consider this sparse regimes. Okay. And then, yeah, the information from here cannot flow until here, so we can separate them.
Okay, if there's no further questions, let's thank the speaker again.